Farley Mowat's Lost in the Barrens. Copyright 1956. Chapter 1. Jamie and Owassen. The month of June was growing cold. It had been a year since Jamie McNair left Toronto, the city of his birth, to take up a new life in the subarctic forests of northern Canada. Besides the shores of McNair Lake, the tamaracks were greening now after the winter's blackness. Out on the lake, great loons cried shrilly. As Jamie squatted in front of the log cabin helping his uncle bale up the winter's catch of furs, he tried to remember how he had felt on that day a year past when he had climbed out of the train at the lonely frontier town called the Paw to meet his uncle. Jamie's uncle, Angus McNair, had been a trader in the Arctic, the master of a sealing schooner in the Barrens Sea, and finally a trapper who roamed over the broad forests of the north. To Jamie, his uncle was almost a legend, and when the telegram came from him, it filled the boy with excitement. Arrangements made for you to join me at the Paw. Stop letter with details follow. Angus McNair. That eagerly awaited letter had brought with it some unhappiness for Jamie. It had reminded him sharply of the tragedy of his parents' death in a car accident 7 years ago, and it had made clear something he had never really faced before, that apart from his uncle, whom he had never seen, he was truly alone. During the past 7 years, he had taken the security of the boarding school for granted. But, reading Angus McNair's letter, he realized that it was no real home, and had never been one. Jamie was 9 when his parents died, and Angus McNair had become his guardian, for he was the boy's only close relative. It was Angus who had picked the boarding school in Toronto, and it was a good one too, for Angus wanted only the best for his nephew. For 7 years, Angus had run his trap line with furious energy in order to meet the cost of the school, but in the past 2 years the fur market had dropped almost out of sight, and the money was nearly at an end. Angus had explained it in his letter. "As you see, Jamie," he wrote, "I can no longer keep you at the school. You could maybe stay on in Toronto and get a job, but you're too young for that. Anyway, I'd hoped you'd rather come to me. It's a long past time we got to know each other. So I took the chance. You'd want it this way. Your ticket is in the envelope along with enough money for the trip. And I'll be waiting, lad, and hoping that you'll come." Angus need have no doubts. For years past, Jamie had loved to read about the North, and for years, Angus McNair had been his idol. In the last week of June, Jamie found himself bundled aboard the Trans-Canada train with the farewells of his school friends still ringing in his ears. For 2 days, the train rolled westward, then it turned abruptly north through the province of Manitoba. The dark jack pine forests began to swallow up the prairie farmlands, and the train rolled on, more slowly now, over the rough roadbed leading to the frontier country. 500 miles and 2 days north from Winnipeg, the train drew up by a rough wooden platform. Jamie climbed uncertainly down to stand staring at the rough shanties and the nearby forest that threatened to sweep in and engulf the little settlement of the Paw. A huge, red-bearded man in a buckskin jacket strode forward and caught the boy about the shoulders in a bear hug. "Do you not know me, Jamie?" he cried. And then, grinning at Jamie's stammering reply, he tightened his hold on the boy's shoulder and swung him around. "You've come to meet the North, my lad," he said, "and I'm thinking you'll be in love with it before the month is out." Angus McNair had been a good prophet, for during the 6-week canoe trip north to McNair Lake, Jamie had become fascinated by the wild face of this new world. Now, a year later, he was really a part of that world. The year in the forest had swelled his shoulders with new muscles so that he looked taller than his 5'8". Summer suns and winter winds had tanned his face. His blue eyes were sharp and alert under his tousled mat of fair hair. And the little cabin by the shores of the lake had become his home, his first real home since his parents died. Built within a stone's throw of the sandy shore, the cabin was nevertheless almost surrounded by the sheltering forests. No winter gales could reach it, and the log walls, well chinked with moss and clay, were proof against the sharpest forests. Crouched comfortably among the trees, it looked out through 2 small windows over a lake that was a glittering expanse of blue in summer and a vast white plain in the winter. Inside, it was divided into 2 rooms. The largest was the living room. It had 2 bunks built against the side walls. A pot-bellied Quebec heater stood in the center of the floor, glowing cherry red in the winter days. Beside the stove, a long, rough-hewn table stretched almost across the room, and at either end of it stood a big homemade easy chair, upholstered with black bear hide. Shelves along the rough log walls held guns, a number of wood carvings done by the Indians, and the well-worn rows of Angus's books. On the split log floors, half a dozen Indian tan deer hides made soft rugs. The tiny kitchen in the rear was cut off from the main cabin by a log partition, and behind the partition Angus cooked the solid and simple meals of the Northland. Although the cabin was 400 miles from civilization and 200 miles from the nearest white man, Jamie had not found it lonely. Not 20 miles away was the settlement of a band of Woodland Cree Indians. These fine and sturdy people had long been Angus McNair's best friends, and they soon became Jamie's friends as well. Alphonse Misawin, headman of the Crees, had been Angus's stout companion on 100 journeys, and it was only natural that Alphonse's son, Awasin, should become almost a brother to young Jamie. In appearance, Awasin was Jamie's opposite. He was lean as a whip with long black hair that hung almost to his shoulders. His eyes, too, were black, and they smiled often as his mouth. And that was very often. For 3 seasons, Awasin had attended the Indian school in far-off Pelican Narrows so that he could read and speak English almost as well as any city boy. But most of his life had been lived in the heart of the forests, and the wilderness was as much a part of him as his own skin. Jamie and Awasin had taken to each other at once, and Awasin had appointed himself Jamie's teacher. Quickly, Jamie had become competent with a paddle and at driving a string of dogs. He learned to shoot well, and he learned enough about trapping to earn the money for a .22 rifle of his own. Most important, under the instruction of Awasin and of Angus McNair, Jamie learned to feel something of the forceful love of life that belongs particularly to those who dwell in the high Arctic forests. It had been a year filled to the brim with new adventures, and as Jamie wound a rawhide strap around a pile of muskrat pelts, his imagination was reliving those events. With a start, he looked up to see a slim cedar canoe rounding a nearby point. Awasin was in the bow, waving his paddle in greeting, and in the stern, Alphonse stolidly chewed his old pipe as he thrust his paddle into the icy waters of the lake.